This is your video for Accentuate the Negative Investigation 1.2, where we are extending the number line. Our learning target for this lesson will be two different items: ordering rational numbers and estimating rational numbers. There are four vocab words for this section: rational numbers, positive numbers, negative numbers, and opposites. Since we've already talked about the real numbers web and put that in your notebook, and since these vocab words are on the web page for this section, I am not going to write those down and use video time for that. So let's jump down on the notes to ordering of rational numbers. Remember that rational numbers are anything that can be written in fraction form. So that's why it's okay that we have both just kind of those integer looking numbers as well as mixed numbers as well as improper fractions. So the first thing that you want to do is to check and see if you can simplify any of those numbers. And there are two that stand out that can be simplified. And those two are the 21/3 and the 3/1. Those can be simplified and actually be taken out of fraction form, which will make it a little easier to place on our number line. And 21/3 can be simplified to 7, and 3/1 can be simplified to 3. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go left to right down that list and place them on my number line. So -4, then I have a -7, my 21/3 I had already simplified to 7, 2.5 will go halfway between the 2 and the 3. Might have to estimate there a little bit, and my dot's a little large. And then 3/1 we had already simplified to 3. So those are going to get really close with how big my dot is. And then the reason that this helps us is because to order from least to greatest, I simply need to go from left to right down the dot that I had placed on the number line. So the furthest one on the left happens to be -7. And just make sure you put commas between everything so it looks as though we're listing separate values here. Then my next purple dot, -4. Continuing on down the number line, 2.5. The next dot I reach is 3. Do make sure here that when you are listing, you go back to the original form of the number that was provided for you in the question. So I need to make sure that I convert it back into its fraction form, 3/1. Same thing with my last value of 7, that I make sure that when I'm listing it, I give the original value of 21/3. And if it's helpful for you, when you're placing those on the number line, you can always write the values above it. So for instance, where I have 7, maybe it would have been helpful to write 21/3 by it, just so that I know that that was the original value. It is completely up to you if you want to write those values above it on the number line, but you do have to make sure that when you're listing, whether the question says from least to greatest or greatest to least, that you do go back to the original value. All right, so let's look at estimating of rational numbers. When we estimate rational numbers, it's almost like the flip-flop of ordering them, where the dots are now on the number line and we need to give the value. So each of the dots has a corresponding letter, A through E. It's up to you if you want to go in order of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, or if you just want to work left to right or even right to left down the number line. I'm just going to go ahead and work left to right. So the way that I fill in my letters to the corresponding blank below will not be in order. So I'm going to be starting with the letter C right here. And looking at that, again, there can be some room for interpretation as far as what you think the value is. I see that it's really close to the line for the integer of -5, but it's not quite on top of it. So I'm going to say that my value for C, I'm going to go a little less than 5, and I'm going to go with 4.8. You could argue probably, a -4.8. You could go with -4.9. You might even be able to say -4.7. I would not go as far as to say it's a -4.5 because it's a little bit further off to the left than halfway. All right, let's move on to point B. That one should be a little easier because that one falls directly on top of that integer line. So point B is not really even an estimation. I can just say that its location is -2. Point A, right here, that one does not fall directly on a line, but it is, or at least appears to be, halfway between 0 and 1. So I would say it's a pretty safe estimation to say that it's 0.5. You can write it in its decimal form, or you could give its fraction form. Either is fine. Let's move on to D, right here. Why don't you put an estimation down before I do? When I look at the point D, I see that it is not quite to the 4, but it looks to be a little bit further away from 3, so putting it closer to 4. So I'm going to say that D might be any like 3.6. You might say that it's 3.7. Could probably even argue 3.8. The point is that you see that it appears to be a little bit bigger or a little bit further than halfway, but it's not yet quite on 4. And again, that's just to show that there is room on either side of what I might think the answer is, because again, we are estimating, so I'm not looking for this to be a perfect value. And then our last one is point E. Again, why don't you write down what you think an estimation is before I put mine up? I'm going to go with my estimation. It looks to be just a little bit to the right of 7. I'm going to go with 7.2. Again, you could be a little different from me. So this has been your video for Accentuate the Negative 1.2, where we have ordered rational numbers and we have estimated rational numbers. Make sure that you have the vocab filled in, and feel free to look around on the 1.2 webpage and click on the links. View that other rational numbers video, as well as play the Battleship number line game if you feel that you need a little extra practice. Otherwise, come to class with your questions or ready to express your understanding of ordering and estimating of these numbers.